Hey guys, so Jagex just released a blog about the return of Bounty Hunter, which I am very excited about, and I wanted to discuss it today. For the most part, I really like what they're proposing, but I do have a few things to say on some individual points. Just like with basically any dev blog, there is quite a lot to cover, so I'm going to be taking this point by point, and I gotta say, it doesn't really start until like this point. Pretty much all this is kind of giving you a bit of a background for what Bounty Hunter is and what edge style PvP is, which is pretty much what you come to expect within Bounty Hunter. And then they also reference Jimmy's video on Bounty Hunter as well, which is pretty cool. We're going to start with the Bounty Hunter crater, what they are proposing. They're proposing, a single crater and not multiple craters, because back in, what was it, like 2008, 2009, whenever they actually introduced the initial Bounty Hunter craters and like the Bounty Hunter game mode itself, it was just kind of smack dab in the middle of, let me just pull this up. It was kind of like smack dab in the middle of the wilderness. Like, I don't remember exactly, but it was somewhere like right here, I guess. I'm not too sure, but like they had it, so they physically put it in the middle of the wilderness. So that's basically what they're proposing here too, although obviously they're gonna have a lot of different mechanics to it, because it used to be that there was 3 different caves that you can enter into. Like there was a low level crater where you can go from level 3 to 55, the middle crater, which was 50 combat to 100 combat, and then the higher crater was anyone over 95 combat. For back in the day, it was cool enough, but in today's day and age, I don't think it's a good idea, and neither do they, so I'm definitely happy about that. They are proposing in there that they just want to have it be just straight, quote unquote honor fights, edge style fights right here. I like the idea of Bounty Hunter being a place where just about anybody can get into on any sort of account build and just try to go PKing. I actually ended up making a few videos on how to make a beginning PKing account just to actually try out PKing within Bounty Hunter. One of the best parts about Bounty Hunter back in the day was you can create an account within 24 hours, go PKing, and then you can just earn a little bit of starting cash. And it's just such a great way to learn PKing, have fun. It's really easy. It's straightforward. I thought it was a great system back in the day. So if we could get that with this new Bounty Hunter crater, I think it would be awesome. They're currently proposing to not have any bind spells, to not have protection prayers. And I think what they mean by that is like to not have pray mage, pray range, pray melee, and no tally block usage. I think that's okay if they wouldn't have it. I don't know about no protection prayers personally. Like, I think it's a good idea in theory, but the reason why I don't think it necessarily works in practicality is I think it just encourages people to just double spec you and then just leave. Regardless of whether that player is going rogue or if they're actually your target, I don't know how I necessarily feel about this. Personally, I think I would keep protection prayers in, since sometimes people are just going to rush you and you're just not ready. You can't teleport out since there is no tally block usage. Like, just thinking about it from the standpoint of a first time PKer, let's say they go in and they get rushed immediately and their first instinct is to teleport. Well, they can't teleport because teleporting is not going to be allowed within this, at least with what they're currently proposing. And so their second instinct would be to go and pray melee, pray range, pray whatever they're being rushed. But if they can't do that either, they might just die. And at that point, they might not want to come back. So I don't know. Personally, I think I would remove that point. But this, of course, is just the initial blog. Just to piggyback off that point too, I would personally like to see some sort of teleports. Maybe just something that brings you back to the lobby, because I'd like the idea of being able to teleport out of a battle. I think it is a nice simplistic thing, and I think removing it could be a bit of a mistake. It's not really a strong point for me. As an experienced PKer, I don't have any issues with there not being any binds, no protection prayers, no tally blocks and everything. I just like the idea of having this be as simple as possible so new players will be able to get into PvP. So once more, Jagex is proposing that they add a crater into the middle of the wilderness, and we'll go over the actual design of the crater itself in a moment, but instead of putting it in the wilderness, I think that it could serve a much better purpose as an island off the east coast of the wilderness. You could access the island by being teleported from the Ferox Enclave by the Emblem Trader to the lobby of this crater on this island. Another way we could access the Bounty Hunter Crater Island is by going to the Ferox Enclave, going down these stairs, and currently the only thing that they really have built out down here is a Soul Wars portal. They have a Fist of Guthix teaser right here, and they also have the Stealing Creation teaser right here. They could easily just add another section in, maybe going north with a portal that brings you to that island. Now, the current proposal of how you would enter into this Bounty Hunter crater would be through one of the 4 entrances. It wouldn't actually matter which entrance you go into out of these 4, since regardless of which one you go into, you will always get placed in a random entrance on the outskirts. So you don't necessarily know where you're entering into. Now, personally, I'm not that big of a fan of the idea since I don't like it being random and you're just being spit out in the middle of nowhere. I think if you're trying to make a simple mini game, you don't add a bunch of different mechanics like spawning in randomly. I just don't think it's a great idea. Personally, I like the way that PKing at the Grand Exchange within PvP worlds works. So if we were to try to use this for a bit of a comparison, you would have the lobby right here. You obviously have the bank as well. You have your loot chest right there. And everything on this platform would obviously be safe. But then if you actually want to engage within the bounty hunter mechanics, you step outside. You step outside of the safe zone. And of course, the actual Grand Exchange is not that big, but I think it does serve as a great visual. Obviously, you would have the borders be a lot bigger. Obviously, there would be a lot more room for PKing, but I like the simplicity of being able to just step right into the wilderness. Boom, you get your target just like you got it in the previous bounty hunter. Or maybe you want to go rogue. Maybe you want to explore the area a little bit, see who's out there. You just end up having a lot more control over what happens to you as the PKer. And for beginner PKers, that's huge. For argument's sake, let's say this is an entrance. I click on the entrance and I get spat out here. Already, I'm going to have to run around to find somebody I want to fight if I want to go rogue, or to find my target. And obviously, the Grand Exchange is small, but the actual proposed bounty hunter crater, I'm going to guess is going to be a lot bigger than that. Already, I don't have a consistent idea as to what is going on. And it's always going to be different every single time I enter, just like it's going to be different every single time another PKer enters. And I don't necessarily think that is a great thing, since what you want to be able to do is to get fast fights. You don't want to have to spend all your time waiting to find someone to fight. You don't want to have to spend your time running around searching for somebody, because currently as it is, a lot of what PKing is just finding people to fight, and you don't really want that. I'm an experienced PKer, so I'm obviously willing to be patient and wait, but other people who want to get into PKing but don't necessarily have the most patience, they're not going to want to consistently spend anywhere from like 2 to 10 minutes trying to find a fight. And maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but still, if you're trying to get PKers quickly into the action, I don't necessarily think it makes sense to just spit them out at random locations. I think it makes more sense that they can enter wherever they want from within the crater. And since they're actually proposing an EP system, which we'll get to later on, I think players should have a decent bit more control and it shouldn't just be randomized. Since the idea behind Bounty Hunter that Jagex is even saying they're trying to go for is accessibility. And if you want accessibility, you need consistency. And having random entrances all around the crater as opposed to just choosing where you enter into and being able to explore yourself, I think that's a mistake. Next in the blog, we have sculling, and they give us two options here. First option being that you will automatically be skulled upon entering the bounty hunter crater, and you can protect items, so you'll protect your highest item, but other than that, on death you will lose all those items except that one protected item. With option 2, they would go with the typical sculling mechanics that the wilderness currently offers, in which you go in unskulled, and to skull up you have to attack your opponent. For this option, they have it so that those players who choose to remain unskulled, they have to deposit GP into the bounty hunter coffer to be able to actually enter the crater. That deposited amount of GP required would actually scale with your combat as well, so the higher you go, the more you would actually have to spend. Personally, out of those two options, I like option 2 more, since I think it gets a wider variety of players involved, and if you choose to unskull, you actually still have to risk a decent amount, since the problem with unskullers is they normally don't risk, but with the proposed mechanic of having to deposit GP if you're going to unskull, I think it balances it out. So you're not punished if you do want to skull, and if you decide that you don't want to skull, you have to pay a fee for it. I think it's a good trade-off. Now let's talk mechanics. So by default, they're saying that your target will be within 5 combat levels of your own. So let's say, for example, you're 70 combat. You're going to be able to be attacked by anyone from 65 combat to 75 combat. And if you want to expand those perimeters, you can make it so you can be attacked by anyone within 10 combat levels to 15 combat levels. So of course, if you go 15 and you're combat level 70, you can attack anyone from 55 combat to 85 combat. Now they say that applies to your target, but I would assume they would also have that for anybody within the crater. So if you set your perimeters to 15, even if that person isn't your target, let's say they're like level 85, I would assume that they could still attack you. At least that would make the most sense. For this section, they're pretty much just talking about how they updated their engine and they'd be able to combat boosters a bit more. For this section, they're talking about upon entering the crater, there's going to be a short delay before you're assigned your target. And they're also thinking about adding a short immunity time, which prevents you from being rushed as soon as you enter, which I think is a good idea. Then right here, they're of course talking about wanting to skip targets. And if you skip too many targets within a short amount of time, you're not going to be able to get another target for 30 minutes. All this, for the most part, I agree with. So next up, they discuss going rogue. And essentially what going rogue is, it's just attacking somebody who is not your target and trying to PK them. Now, in the old bounty hunter, if you went rogue, the reward for going rogue was that person's potential loot. That's why you would want to go rogue, because you think that they have good loot, which benefits you more than following the actual bounty hunter system. That's why you go rogue. It's obviously nice to have that option because sometimes you want to attack somebody that's not your target, and that's a perfectly valid and legitimate thing. Now again, going rogue in the old bounty hunter system had a trade-off. That trade-off was that you won't actually gain any bounty hunter points for going rogue. What you do gain is that person's loot, and that is it. Now, personally, I thought that was a great trade-off because obviously you want to be able to access the bounty hunter shop. There's a very good reason to actually partake within the bounty hunter system itself for the points. Going rogue in the old bounty hunter system was a nice way to take a break from that system while obviously not being rewarded by it. So again, I thought it was a good trade-off. Now, what they are currently proposing with this new bounty hunter rogue system is that going rogue is met with a consequence. Their current proposed consequence for going rogue is that if you actually get a PK while going rogue, you're not allowed to leave to the lobby area for a short amount of time. They're also looking for suggestions though, of course, in case they don't want to do that. Now, personally, my suggestion, I think that they just don't have any consequences for going rogue. I think the only quote-unquote consequence that you actually need is that you are opting out of the bounty hunter system and you won't actually gain points for going rogue. I don't think it necessarily makes sense to box the player in mechanically and punish them for wanting to deviate from what the system suggests that they do. Especially if we go back up here to where they're proposing that you won't have protection prayers. Like imagine you go rogue, you get a kill on somebody, and then you can't leave for 30 seconds. What's stopping some guy from just watching all of that and then just rushing you and you just die? You can't use protection prayers, you're probably low on supplies as well. It just doesn't really make sense in my opinion. I don't think that there should be any consequences. Next up, they want to bring back emblems, and I think that is an awesome idea. I loved Bounty Hunter 1's emblem system. I thought it was just an incredible system. It's very simple, very straightforward. I would love to see that. They have two different approaches for this though, the single emblem system and the multi-emblem system. For the single emblem system, I think it's saying that you're only able to have one emblem on you at all times, which can't be traded, can't be alchemized, can't be noted, it can't be stacked. So I don't think that you're allowed to have any extra emblems. Like I assume with this system, you're only ever going to have one emblem on your account. You can't PK them, you can't do anything else. Maybe I'm reading that wrong, but I think that's what they're saying there. They also have the multi-emblem approach, which is basically what the Bounty Hunter 1 system was. You can have multiple emblems on your account. You can have a bunch of tier 1 emblems. You can have some tier 3s. You can have a tier 9. Let's say you don't want to actually risk that tier 9. You just bring a tier 3 emblem. The multi-emblem system, I think, just makes so much more sense in my opinion. And I like the idea of how it used to be where you could trade tier 1 emblems and you could trade tier 10 emblems. I guess it makes sense to not trade tiers 2 through 8, although obviously I wouldn't really mind. But that was just such a nice thing that you could just trade tier 1 and tier 10 emblems on the GE. I think it was cool, and I think that should come back. Next up, they're discussing bounty hunter points, which I guess would be a potential additional system alongside the emblem system. Either that or they're trying to decide between the bounty hunter point system or the emblem system, which I don't think they're trying to do that necessarily. I think that they're in favor of the emblem system. But regardless, if they were to choose between the two, I liked the emblem system a lot more. I liked having a physical item that you actually had to risk to be able to further your points along. So I think this would just be like a little extra incentive alongside emblems. I mean, they literally even say that right here, saying that they want to add a little something extra. I don't really have much to say about that. Overall, I really do like the idea, but I wouldn't know how to speak to the actual balancing act of getting this right so it couldn't be boosted. So I think it's a cool idea, but I don't really have much thoughts on it. Moving on to the most important thing about PvP, in my opinion, the monetary reward. In my opinion, if you want to incentivize new players to try out PKing, there has to be at least a small monetary reward to be able to get them in, because new PKers will inevitably die, and if they're just hemorrhaging all this money and not really getting much back in return for their efforts, they're not going to want to continue PKing. Thankfully, it seems that Jagex agrees here, and they are proposing an EP system. The way that they're proposing this earning potential or EP system to actually work is all players will start off with 0 EP upon entering Bounty Hunter. To be eligible to actually gain EP, players must risk a certain amount of GP. That risk needs to be deposited within a coffer, and I'm going to guess that it needs to be a GP monetary value, since they talked about how previous EP systems were pretty much abused. If a player is eligible to gain EP, they'll gain 2.5% EP every 2 minutes. And of course, entering a safe area before that 2 minutes is up will reset your EP gain timer, but it's not going to reset your overall EP that you've earned. If you end up dying to your target, your EP will increase by 10%, which I think is a nice little addition to this system. They also note that they can time gate this mechanic as well, so it wouldn't be abusable. Upon killing your target, your EP will deplete back to 0%. Depending on how much EP you actually had at the time of you getting that kill, you'll receive some kind of reward crate, and the average value increases with higher EP. They also note here too that the original suggestion had this value made up primarily of artifacts that could be traded to an NPC. They also noted here that it's not like the old EP system that you probably remember where you could just get a random dragon full helm. You're not going to be able to do that. I'm going to guess that's going to be some other items. The overall idea of the EP system though is they want to add an extra monetary incentive on top of all of that. So it really seems like they're trying to build a few different layers of incentives for Bounty Hunter, which I think is great. I'm assuming that this isn't replacing the current loot system too. Like if you PK somebody for 500k, like a Dragon Scimitar, Rune Plate Legs, all that stuff, you get that plus whatever you get from the EP system. I'm assuming once more that it's just a further reward incentive, which I think is great personally. I mean, you have the emblem system, you have the potential Bounty Hunter points, and then you have an EP system on top of all of that. I think that's awesome. Now moving on to the rewards. They want to bring back PvP armors and have them usable only within the Bounty Hunter minigame, which I think is a great idea. So they'll bring back all the Vesta gear, the Statius, the Morrigans, and the Zuriels. And of course it would be the gear as well as the weapons. Now personally, I think this is a really awesome idea, and I like the fact that you're only going to be able to use it within the Bounty Hunter minigame. I think it makes Bounty Hunter that much more special to have all of this gear only usable with inside of it. They also want to bring back the corrupted versions of this gear, so the tier 20 weapons as well as the tier 40 armors. And they're proposing that just like the old corrupted armors, these items disintegrate after being worn for 15 minutes. Now personally, I think that if all this is going to come into the game, 1, it should be tradable, 2, it should not be degradable, and 3, it should cost a lot of GP to actually use this gear, and if you die with it, the gear just disintegrates. I don't really like the idea of this gear being on a time limit. Maybe people disagree with me, but I think it's a much cooler idea that these weapons just exist, but they could still absolutely degrade into dust once lost in a PvP death. The next proposed rewards will be Bounty Hunter specific weapon attachments / imbues. Effectively, they're just talking about imbuing weapons like the Dragon Mace, the Dragon Longsword, the Dark Bow, the DDS, all of that stuff to make them a lot more powerful specifically within Bounty Hunters, which in turn will make these fights a lot more interesting. And again, they'll only be able to be used within Bounty Hunter. I would love to see these items being used again in PvP. I think it's a really cool suggestion, and I'm all for it. Another proposed reward is combat XP. So just like you can spend your pest control points on combat XP, just like you can spend your Soul War Zeal on combat XP, you'll be able to do that here as well within Bounty Hunter. Personally, I obviously love that idea, so I would love to see that in the game. They're also proposing ornament kits and recolors. I'm obviously all for that. They're also proposing a few different types of rewards, which I think are going to be cool, but other than that, that is the whole blog. Overall, I think it's an absolutely great blog, and I obviously do hope that they take some of my suggestions, but even if they don't, I have the highest confidence in the Oldschool Runescape team. They absolutely killed it with the Wilderness Boss rework, and I really do think that they are going to knock Bounty Hunter out of the park. I'm thinking about uploading more RuneScape content to this channel, so if you guys want to see that, please let me know down below, subscribe to the channel, and I think my next video might be a Q&A. I'm not sure, so let me know what you think, but other than that, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.